Chapter 137 to 138. Ringo created 5 clones in total. 2 for the right and left side each and 1 for the middle path, where her real body was going to hit. The clones quickly sneak into their positions as the plans start. The ones on the right and left side distance themselves from the ANBU guarding the corridors and create a small commotion not far from that place, drawing at least some ANBU away and creating confusion among them. Honestly, the cavern corridors were all interconnected, and this was a bit risky plan, but if she didn't make the side corridors guards busy, the risk would be way bigger. As long as she dealt with the guards in the middle corridor quickly enough, she might even be lucky enough to lower the number of ANBU guards in the last defensive line with the actions of her clones. It didn't take long for sounds to start spreading from neighboring corridors, and Ringo grinned. The guards in front of her certainly looked restless enough as she watched them from behind a small protrusion on the wall near the ceiling, cowered in shadows, while her clone was a bit further away. Ringo's clone planted a low-powered explosive tag on the wall of the corridor quite far away from the guards, before taking an appropriate distance and hiding in the shadows as the exploding tag ignited. The explosion alerted the guards almost instantly, making the 2 visible ones move towards the spot. They were far from the puddle and ceiling guy when they finally arrived, only to see a scorched wall. But clone or not, Ringo was still way better at sneaking around. They didn't even manage to widen their eyes as 2 swords pierced their hearts from behind by the clone lurking in the shadows before it dispelled. While the 2 visible guards went away, Ringo infused as much lighting chakra into a kunai and threw it towards the puddle guy. Not even glancing if he noticed and prepared to dodge, Ringo ran on the ceiling towards the ANBU hidden there. She could only hear a sizzling sound of lightning and water and a loud scream as her sword impacted the tanto of the last remaining ANBU, pushing him back. Clearly, her kunai hit spot on. Ringo could see the minuscule widening of the ANBU's eyes as he realized just who was clashing swords with him and panicked. After all, not every day one found himself crossing blades with a legend from his village. His hesitation lasted barely a split second. A small flinch that would mean nothing in front of most jonin, but alas, Ringo was not most jonin. Her instincts flared, and before even she herself knew it, her sword slightly tapped her enemy's blade away, with minimal strength in order to do it as soundlessly as possible, before the tip of her sword quickly found its way into the ANBU's chest. The man was dying before he finally recollected his wits. Ringo's eyes also widened in surprise at how she reacted, and she only barely managed to catch his body and stick it to the ceiling with her chakra, as she flattened herself by laying on her back there just in time for a unit of 4 ANBU to run under her through the corridor. Fortunately, they are too busy to look up, Ringo mentally sighed, hopping onto the floor, and with a quick flick of her wrist, she threw the cloak of the corpse currently sticking onto the ceiling around her shoulders and put his mask on. Sure, she will probably be discovered if someone pays her too much attention, but now, when the second defensive line in the cave is under attack, Ringo doubted anyone would care about one masked ANBU walking around. Ringo walked through the corridors, avoiding the rushing ANBU. Whenever she met such a group, she pretended to make haste as if she was going to report, and nobody really even raised an eyebrow at her despite her heading deeper into the cave rather than to check out the commotion. The further she walked, the more apparent it became that the Chunin and Jonin were just a diversion. In the cave must have been stationed at least 100 ANBU, and compared to that, the first 2 defense lines were quite pathetic. Ringo really couldn't help but chuckle and praise herself for making many of the ANBU head outside of the 3rd defense line in order to check out whatever setup her clones made. From time to time, she could even hear explosions going off, and only one of her 4 shadow clones on the sides dispelled so far. Honestly, reputation or not, she didn't like her chances at sneaking inside with such skilled sentries all over it. The entire place was more guarded than a damn castle of a major daimyo. After 20 minutes of walking through the cavern corridors that resembled a labyrinth, Ringo finally arrived at the main hall, where the sealing of the sandby just finished. The whole room was big, almost massive, with a stone altar covered in seals and 4 big crude stone pillars covered in big ceiling tags. On the altar, a small naked form of teenage female laid. Only her Konoha forehead protector was still on her head as she drooled onto the altar and occasionally twitched from pain. Ringo winced when she saw the girl. Killing might have been her job, but she at least made sure to make it as painless as possible whenever the target was not somebody deserving it. The girl on the altar, though, she was clearly put through hellish pain, and her brain was still in the process of rebooting. Ringo didn't wait and walked towards the girl while discreetly molding her lighting chakra. Before anyone even noticed her actions, she was sufficiently close to the altar, and that's when all hell broke loose. The old farts that were Kiri Seal Master tried to desperately distance themselves. The guarding ANBU tried to rush closer to Ringo, and Ringo clapped her hands. A loud bang resonated through the cave before a static noise unbalanced everyone in range. The second this happened, powerful lighting tendrils coursed out of Ringo's connected palms, creating a cage around the altar, completely cutting out the guards. To think this is not even a jutsu yet, just an exercise for manipulation of my lightning chakra. Ringo smirked and walked towards the girl before she took a sealing tag given to her by Ray, and after 20 minutes of trying drew some of the Sanbai's chakra into it. Mission completed. Ringo sighed as she saw her lightning cage being surrounded by no less than 30 ANBU and flexed her chakra. The lighting cage instantly morphed, but the ANBU guards didn't have time to rush in since the lightning took shapes of various animals. Bears, wolves, dogs, deers, and many more, before it started engaging the ANBU who did their damnedest to avoid the moving concentrated lightning constructs. The biggest of them, however, was a big Chinese dragon made of lightning that rammed its head into the side of the cave, creating a way out through the wall. Ringo briefly glanced at the waking girl on the altar and shook her head before uncaringly walking out. And just like that, the last piece is collected. Raza returned from the Kage summit, where he signed the worthless piece of paper called the Peace Treaty. Honestly, he didn't really know what actually was the purpose of the document, except for being an agreement for the official end of the war. Sure, it had a few stipulations here and there, but frankly, Raza didn't even remember what exactly these stated, since nobody really could enforce them. Hence they were not worth remembering. He was sure that Kumo would breach it in 3 to 5 years tops, without even knowing they did it. After all, the new Raikage looked young and brash, and worse yet, he looked driven to strengthen Kumo at all cost. Raza secretly heard him yelling threats at the Mizukage, while asking for the heads of every ninja who participated in the mission that resulted in the death of his fiancée. Needless to say, the Mizukage just smiled with amusement at the young brute. Raza was just glad Suna was far away from Kumo, so he would not be forced to deal with the man much. Crossing the last sand dune, Raza finally spotted his beloved Tsunegakure, and promptly froze. "Oi, Baki, is that mist?" he asked in disbelief. "That is mist, my lord." Baki nodded, not knowing what else to add. But shit. Raza cursed and instantly sped up towards the village. Did the waterfucker breach the treaty already? Fortunately for Suna, the Mizukage had no interest in them. The visit from Yozora happened 2 days ago, but there was still an enormous amount of water all around constantly in the process of vaporizing. The entire Tsunegakure was veiled in a thin cover of water vapor. Raza didn't even look at the guards standing at the sides of the corridor in the sand wall. He just ran forward, passing the bewildered Chunins at a speed they could not follow. Why are Chunin guarding the gate when they can't even intercept someone at Jonin-level speed? Raza idly thought, but it was quickly squashed as he finally entered Tsunegakure. He stared in bewilderment at the houses made of hardened sand soaked in water, some of them partially dissolved. The buildings in Suna depended on the environment where rain never happened. This new flood, or whatever it was, destroyed quite a bit of building and the damages. Oh, the damage. Suna looked half buried in sand and half flooded by water. Even now the Kazakage was actually ankle-deep in the water. What the heck happened to my village? He screamed with wide eyes. Oh, Lord Kazakage. One passing Jonin saw him and jumped in front of him, taking a kneeling position before slightly frowning due to having to kneel in the water. We survived a storm? I have no idea, but the censor ninjas are saying it was natural. Pakura, however, says it was not, and that she briefly fought the enemy. She was found passed out on the top of the Kazakage tower, with what the council believes is a message from those who attacked us. Pakura. Raza's eyes narrowed, but nodded the ninja to lead the way. He really didn't like that woman, always criticizing his decisions, saying what she thought would be a better decision. Worse yet, since she became the hero of Suna in the war, she actually had some support in the council, and that was that. Maybe her advice had merit, but couldn't she give them in private, so he won't be publicly undermined? Nope, he really didn't like that woman. The Kazakage arrived at Pakura's room in the hospital and saw her sitting in the bed, giving orders to a few Jonin, which only soured his mood. Jonin Pakura, who gave you the right to command my forces? He coldly asked the bedridden woman. Oh, Lord Kazakage, Pakura smiled. Counselor Saruna gave me the command, since this situation is non-standard. She informed him indifferently. I started with having our ninjas help with getting rid of the water and the repairs of the half-collapsed buildings. Our forces? Fucking Saruna. I gave her the command because I knew she would not under any circumstances pass it to someone else. Raza inwardly cursed while his face stayed impassive. He clearly miscalculated, and the second there was a problem, Saruna passed the command to someone else in order to not be blamed if she did anything wrong. I see. He jerked his head down, trying to pass it as a nod. Then could you describe what exactly happened? Yes, sir. 2 days ago, a heavy storm impacted Tsunegakure. I quickly asked for the help of our censor ninjas, who assured me it was natural. There wasn't much I could do about it in that case, so I started trying to vaporize the water with my scorch, in order to prevent the village from being completely flooded. Sometime during this action, I realized that if this was not really a natural occurrence, the enemy would most likely aim for the treasury. The rain was too thick and the communication with others was completely cut, so I risked it and went alone. Pakura stopped her droning out how the events happened and grimaced. It was the guy who was hired by you to help us get past the IWA border outpost. The Yozora. She trailed off. Knowing this information didn't look well for the Kazekage. It might not mean much, but it has certainly shown a bit of incompetence on his part. Raza bristled at that. The political situation in Suna didn't look all that well for him. He and Pakura's supporters were in direct opposition. Funnily enough, Pakura herself didn't give any indication of being interested in the position, but that didn't mean anything since she was the only ninja capable of facing him in the village. This entire thing just proved she was more competent than him, and he didn't like it. He could already see some councilmen harping at him for months, uncaring he was not present during the attack. What of the Bairi representatives? He asked. It was them who recommended Yozora, so I have had them interrogated. There was no real need for anything serious in that regard, since they were very cooperative. We have information of what exactly Yozora is. Pakura gestured towards the table where the report lied. I must say, I was taken down by one jutsu. I have no idea how to even start thinking of fighting that monster. She quietly added, lowering her head. The room suddenly descended into silence as the Kazekage took the document and read through it. The present ninjas were all Jonin ranked, and seeing one of their strongest say she had no chance. It didn't bode well for them. Ray of Kiri? SS rank? What the fuck is somebody like that attacking Suna for? According to this report, nothing was stolen too despite him being in the treasury. Raza read through the document and sighed in relief. At least the seals in the treasury worked, and nothing was destroyed despite the snow covering everything. Seriously, snow? In the desert? What the fuck is that guy? At this rate, we can write him off as a natural disaster instead of a ninja. Raza glanced at Pakura and his eyes gleamed. Maybe I could. I see, this is troubling. Jonin Pakura, what is the extent of your injuries? He asked. Pakura shook herself from her sullen mood and raised her head to look at the Kazekage. I have many cracked bones, torn muscles, and I was half frozen when they brought me to the hospital. According to the medics, I will stay in bed at least for a half year, followed by another half year of retraining myself to get back into shape. Very well. Job well done, Jonin Pakura. Raza nodded before turning around and walking away with the report on Yozora. Despite his stern face, he was inwardly grinning. Looks like luck is on my side. I was talking with the Mizukage about how we could help each other out, but to think a Kiri Nuke Nin would attack Suna. Raza was almost skipping with elation. He couldn't just assassinate Pakura. He needed a good reason to get rid of her. After all, the daimyo liked the woman. Raza even tried to find out if she pulled kunoichi on the old decrepit fool, but apparently there was no hanky-panky between the two. But because of this connection, Raza needed to get rid of Pakura quietly and legally. He was aware it would considerably weaken Suna, but the woman was too dangerous to him. Daimyo's support, many supporters in the council and among clans, moreover fame, and being liked by the general populace and non-clan shinobi, it was as if the woman was aiming to become the Kazekage. The saddest part was, she didn't even realize her actions were threatening Raza, causing him to think of a way to be rid of her. I thought it would take years to send her on her way, but this made it all so much easier. I have to send somebody competent to Kiri, after all. I just hope the Mizukage won't ask for too much for this help, since I will be providing him with a quality bloodline breeding sow. As such, Pakura's fate as an emissary to Kirigakure was already sealed, a year before she even recovered.